Okay, related to the Pancasila and the current education's issues like liberal art, for examples, how's your opinions about it? So, can we put it into all together into one education system, for example?
Right. Um, so I think it would be that you take this capacity for
Yeah.
reflective consciousness
Oh
and
yeah.
you create an educational system
Mm-hmm.
that the student you graduate,
Mm-hmm.
right, when they get their degree, they have reflected upon,
Oh yeah.
right?
Mm.
They know the material, but they also have reflected upon how each discipline fits into the culture,
Mm-hmm.
how it's affecting the culture,
Mm-hmm.
um, how it's either part of the culture or, and so they have some vision
Mm-hmm.
of how it fits together and where they want to take
I
the
see.
society, right? You're the
Mm-hmm.
next generation. Here's where we've been. Here's where we are. Where do you want to go? Um, for example, just getting students to reflect on, I tell them this, you happen to be going to college
Mm-hmm.
right when 9/11 happened. This is going to be a watershed, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a different memory of
Yeah.
college, or you're going to college when Donald Trump was elected.
Oh
Like, you
yeah.
should be aware of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of your life at this point. You don't want to be detached. You're not a disembodied idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're an engaged citizen. You're aware. So that's the ancient view, is
Oh,
that
I
all
see.
the conversations in
Mm.
Plato's dialogues or tragedy, they're within a context
Mm.
of a culture and a historical moment. And so again, if you go back to behaviorism,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't talk about that,
Yeah.
and cognitivism doesn't, and structuralism doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
because they have a different idea of the mind.
Mm.
You can create your own system and act on it.
Oh, I
So,
see.
as I was saying, with like social science or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you learn these techniques, but everybody knows that whatever I study about people right now, there's going to be these climate events, and
Mhm.
it's all going to be thrown in the trash because people are going to be a lot more afraid, right? So everything people studied and all that research, and then there was 9/11. It's like,
Mm.
throw that away. Like, that
Oh, I
just is
see.
completely irrelevant.
So can we say just that a reflection is actually the things that need to be done in educations, reflecting to their cultural situation, reflecting their ecology, ecosystems,
Right.
right? So
Where do you think the country's going in 30
I
years?
see.
Where would you like it to go?
Mm.
Where has it been? That's where I think Indonesia should step up and speak out about their culture. And the president is president of ASEAN. This is big. Like, he's got this
Oh, I
big
see.
platform because the countries in ASEAN do not want the U.S. and China to have a
Mhm.
war,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Because it's
Mhm.
not in their interest. They get
Mhm.
used as a proxy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they should be able to stand up and say, we're going to trade with you, and we're going to trade with you, and you just leave us out of it, right?
Mhm.
We don't want you to say, if you trade with us, you can't trade with us,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Just keep us. This is an important platform, and Indonesia will be recognized more. So
Yeah, yeah.
I really think Indonesia should step up and
Mhm.
take some pride in your tradition. But if you do that, you have to make your tradition good, right?
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge the corruptions
Mm.
of the past.
Yep.
But I think you have a lot of potential.
Yeah. So because reflection is actually, I told you earlier that it also deals with our identity, right? So if we
Yes.
have bad identity, then how can we reflect good things? And then in higher education, for example, um, in what way that reflectivity happens when in teaching and learning process based on your own experience,
Okay.
Prof. Martha?
Well, let's see. So we'll read a dialogue, for example, where Socrates is talking to a religious
Oh.
leader.
Mm.
And this really happened. He took his father to court for murder. All right? And it was a very questionable case.
Yeah.
His slave got drunk and killed the slave, and he put him in a ditch, and he asked the gods, and the guy died. Okay. And Socrates is saying, are you sure you know what God wants?
Oh.
Right? And he says, well, yes, it quotes right in Homer that the gods and the stories are awful, but the tradition is telling you you'll be tempted to do this, don't do it. But he was reading it literally. All right. So now you have this paradigm, right? Socrates says, well, that's why I don't believe the stories, because the gods are good and that isn't good. Okay, so we have this paradigm. The person who reads the Quran literally,
Yeah.
and you can pick out your quotes and create a holy war,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or the person who reads it poetically or reads it for the overall spirit or the way of life, in which case it's very tolerant, very open, right? And so the students, I have some newspaper articles I talk about in our country, capital punishment. God says
Capital
yes, God says no, right? And so then I just throw out all that, and then they talk to each other. They come up with their own examples. That's reflective consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, can I say just as a closing statement,
Yes.
for example, that actually by having reflective is actually like finding our own identity, right?
Yes.
So finally, when we refer to Pancasila, then finally we have found reasons why we need to make it into our ideology, because this is a part of our identity because of the process of reflection, of course.
Well, it's good. Like, it helps you formulate an idea of the good
Yeah.
that's not bigotry, right? That promotes humanity,
Yeah.
that calls out politicians who take the money and run, that all the character traits that we need moving into the 21st century. Cooperation, conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the idea of the good life embedded in that? And wow, that's really what everybody needs. So you should step up, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say. Then the next thing is, how do you develop a curriculum where students are doing that?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you start out describing Panchasila, and then you say, okay, how do you want to, and then say, I'm implementing that in this class in this way. This is how I'm trying to get you to keep remembering the idea of the good in Panchasila, is you're going to read this assignment, but you're going to think about it in this broader way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because as long as you keep tying it to this idea, then by the time they finish 4 years, they can recognize there's a pattern here.
But in the end, the reflection is actually personal, is it? True?
Well, sure, but it's based on analogy. So I think if you can realize every human being has lived through this, right? What's most personal to you is also most universal.
Oh, yeah.
All right?
That's
So you know how it is. I don't know about you, but you fall in love and you think nobody's ever felt this way before. Like, this is unbelievable. Nobody's ever been in love like I'm in love. And you go, well, yeah, maybe not. I mean, what do you think all those poems and all those stories?
Perhaps because reflection actually involves emotions in
Yeah.
in and I think that is a part of thing that we cannot easily forget.
Yeah, no. Or your boyfriend cheats on you and he's like, oh my God, I want to
It's
kill
life
him.
lessons.
Right? And it's just, then you all of a sudden this emotion, no. It's our instinctual drives. Like, it's the closest to the brainstem. They're trying to teach you not to overreact. But then you would understand, this has been true for anyone who's ever lived in the last 5,000 years, and the brain is sophisticated enough to reflect on itself, right? So all those old folk tales, that's why they still are relevant, because they're still appealing to these basic drives.
Also, this is still the best method to teach someone, teach our students actually.
I think so.
Yeah.
Is when you let them know this is really about you, but you're really about being a human being.
Yeah.
right? It's
Yep.
being you isn't just about you.
Yep.
Okay?
true.
But that's what Panchasila
Mm-hmm.
is trying to tell you. But anyway, again, is so much potential for
Mm-hmm.
using that ideology to create a great culture, but have to admit it gets corrupted. Otherwise, the politicians are really be able to hide behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, but I think we keep going to make it better and better. And yeah, we still need more time, but I think yeah, the insight that you have given actually opened my mind about Pancasila especially. We just put it into we just memorize it, but we don't put it
Yeah.
into our
Right.
heart. That's the
I don't know. Can you have faculty meetings about it? That's where
oh
you
yeah.
really need to get like the whole college on board, reflecting on it, right? The
Yes, I think,
administrators, the faculty, because it doesn't necessarily mean having to change a curriculum, but it means having to do the whole thing in a certain way,
So we
right?
yep. Mm. Those who change is not only the students, but also all
Of
of the
course.
all of the ecosystems.
Well, I mean, I was at this Pasandran,
Yeah.
and it was about learning English. And then you find out that the teachers who teach English have memorized the book. They
Oh.
teach the book, but they never, ever speak in English or read anything outside of
Yeah.
class. Well, that's not English, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, right now you have a curriculum,
Mm-hmm.
and it has, but it probably has not been guided by
Mm-hmm.
wanting to keep it tied to the vision of Panchasila. All you do is put that level in there and then rethink how you're going to teach it, or other co-curricular activities, right? What are the
Mhm.
citizens doing? I mean, the students, what student groups are there? Are those, all this stuff. The reason student groups occur in college is so students learn how to govern, right?
Mhm.
So up until college, they usually are told what to do. Now they
Mhm.
have to learn how to lead,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Well, then you tie that to Panchasila. How are you going to lead? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say you could fundamentally change your school just by changing the vision and by
Mhm.
articulating it without really changing the curriculum at all. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, it doesn't cost money. You don't have to pay these outside advisors billions of bucks to
Yeah.
come in.
But awareness is not that simple.
Right.
So, any closing statement before I close the session, Prof?
Okay.
Would you please give a closing, some words related to
Okay.
our topic now?
All right. So this is what I really think. I am a philosopher. I
Mhm.
like democracy.
Yeah.
I like intellectual freedom.
Mhm.
I think if you believe in God or karma, the universe is understandable. And we
Yeah.
have the capacity to understand it.
Mhm.
The basic patterns. We know enough to know we ought to get along. We know
Mhm.
enough to know we have a common humanity. Whatever else. So, I think that democracies are in decline.
Mhm.
And I think if you can't live in a democracy, you can't be an honest religious person
Oh.
because there's ulterior motives,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm Muslim, now give me that job.
Mhm.
Or, the politician, oh, I'm Muslim. And then in the back, right? So you need a democracy to be authentic.
Mhm.
And we're supposed to ultimately think for ourselves and listen to other people and constantly
Mhm.
improve our lives. Democracies are in decline.
Yeah.
And Indonesia is the third largest democracy. India, US, and Indonesia.
Mhm.
It has all these moderate Muslims. And Islam has been a tool, has been weaponized. It has a
Mhm.
reputation as a great weapon
Mhm.
for authoritarianism, right? It's not. So I like Pancasila. I think Indonesia should step into the global space
Mhm.
and take itself seriously
Yeah.
and recognize, it gets corrupted, but hey, anything could get corrupted.
Yeah.
But I do think that your students here should envision that it will be different.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm 50 years older than the students. And I say, think about how different the world will be by the time you're my age. Now, how are you going to lead, right? If you don't lead, you follow. You should, if you go to college, you're supposed to be a leader.
Yeah.
But you have to envision something better and then go for it, right?
Okay. Yep.
And so I'd like Indonesians, I'd like you to meet administrators and faculty and converse about this and keep the vision in mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is really important for any institution to always keep in mind. And educational institutions have a really good mission, right?
Yeah.
It's not like making money is your mission or having power is your mission. You have this wonderful mission, which is educating the next generation
Yeah.
to be enculturated, and you have a great ideology. You're situated well in terms of speaking out against animosity between the U.S. and China, which could be a huge problem. You just have a lot to offer the world stage, and I hope you can figure out how to do it.
Yeah, we're going to figure out with some of my colleagues about it, and then I think, yeah, we would like to say thank you very much for this sharing, and there are a lot of things that I got from you. Although this is actually the issues is something that is actually we found it every day, but we just realized, wow, this is actually our identity. This is actually what need to be reflected by all, and also by my students. Well, thank you very much for sharing, Prof. Martha, and see you next meeting, and see you tomorrow. Then tomorrow you're going to have another agenda here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
One more thing before I leave,
Yep.
I guess.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. I didn't know I was going to have a podcast, but I'm really happy about it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. Kuliah
Kuliah aman,
aman, kerja
kerja
nyaman di
di
PJJ PAI.